The Upshur County jail cell that once housed a serial killer will be demolished. The cell was where executed murderer Jerry Animal McFadden was kept and escaped from in 1986.
And the Upshur County Commissioner's Court did discuss making it a memorial to his victims, a plan that angered the victims' family members. As KLTV7's Jamie Boyum reports, ultimately today that court voted to tear that jail cell out.
Those in favor of demolishing the jail cell, let it be known.
The vote was unanimous. Upshur County Judge Todd Tefteller moved agenda item 11 up, so the standing room only courtroom didn't have to wait. Many wanted to speak out about keeping executed murderer Jerry McFadden's cell intact for historical purposes. Representing some family members of victims, Longview attorney Kelly Heitkamp protested the use of McFadden's name in front of her clients.
Please refer to that thing as it.
The court complied, first listening to Dan Spence, who is married to a cousin of McFadden victim Suzanne Harrison.
It actually sensationalizes and glamorizes that jail's most infamous prisoner, done under the guise of honoring the murder victims. It's a shame that that would even be an idea that was brought up by someone.
Murder victim Gina Turner's father, Calvin Turner, said when he heard about keeping the cell, it was like opening an old wound.
How would you feel if that was your daughter? And knowing that there was a possibility of her name being in the same building, location, or wherever with it. Heartbreaking. We did not get any closure until I was able to attend the execution.
Darlene Stedman is a cousin of Suzanne Harrison's mother. She's lived in East Texas for 67 years.
Do you want him to represent a wonderful county like Upshur and Gilmer? Do y'all want that? Do you want to preserve the cell to obtain notoriety for your county? Is there any benefit in doing this?
Suzanne Harrison's aunt, Glenda Lane, identified Suzanne's body. She asked the court about McFadden's family.
Did you call his family? They are beautiful people. I worked with his sister for years, and they don't deserve this either. They do not deserve this either.
David Hazel was a Longview police officer and part of the manhunt for McFadden in 1986. He now works for the Upshur County Sheriff's Office, but he was not speaking in that capacity.
The preservation of the jail cell is my idea. I'm the one who proposed it almost 3 years ago. Jerry Walter McFadden was the embodiment of evil. As infamous as it was, the escape of that serial killer was the most consequential event in the history of that courthouse across the street. To demolish that cell in the course of a historical restoration would be to deny the building's history, not tell it.
Others spoke as well, but after the vote to destroy the cell, there looked to be no hard feelings in the courtroom. There were hugs and handshakes all around, and the controversial cell will now go the way of Jerry McFadden. Jamie Boyum, KLTV 7 News.
Now, the demolition contractor was updated today on the court's decision.